rocking the free world.
Keep on rocking the free world.
Going on, ladies and gentlemen and transgendered species and all 68 genders? How are you all doing? I have hair in my eye all day. I can't get it out. What the hell? I was just, it's a rainy day today, and I was just cleaning up my house and looking at little things I'm going to do, little paint touch-ups. I'm going to change the color of the wooden rails along behind the camera, and just little things I'm gonna do to this van, you know, kind of winter projects. You know, you don't do too much to the outside in the winter except clean it. And it's, to me, it's just normality, is making my space as comfortable as possible, because it is my home. And for me for everybody it's different, but for me personally, that means making it warm and inviting, and that can be done in all sorts of ways. Like, if you remember when I first bought this van, the whole thing was off-white. There was some pretty horrid 90s wallpaper on the walls, and the upholstery was almost sickening, at least for me. So I reupholstered everything, made new curtains, and I mean, the theme of the van, obviously, from when I bought it, was going to be black on purple. So those two colors were going to be the main colors everywhere, with a little bit of contrast here and there, some brass and some gold on the outside, things like that. But I realized that a lot of van people do this, and they make their space theirs. And each van that I've had, I've just chosen a theme and run with it. My last one, as you remember, was a wood cabin. So the inside felt like you were walking into a log cabin, and it had a giant wood stove on the floor. You know, the Kimberly wood stove. And it just, people on the outside were like, it just looks like a nice, clean, slick white RV, right? And they walk in and it's a wood cabin. It just blew their minds. I actually almost thought about vinyl wrapping the outside as a wood log cabin wrap. I've seen that done on some trailers before, and it looks actually pretty cool. And then be like a tiny house motorhome, basically. But I ended up selling that before I ever got around to doing the outside, how I was planning. But the one I had before that was the Dodge Explorer, and with that I just tried to modernize it and clean it up. It was already white on the interior, which I'm not a big fan of, but I pretty much stuck with the white, but I changed all the horrid green that it had mixed with the white and changed it to black, so it was black and white contrast. If I still had that van, it probably wouldn't be white anymore, to be honest. And so that's why I've redone everything in here, because I find colors so much better than just white, and white is impossible to keep clean on top of that. I realize that we all take this for granted, though. Those of us that live in our tiny homes, our motorhomes, our vans, our boats, whatever, we can do whatever we want. And just to give you a little example, like my mother, her condo in Vancouver, she owns it. Air quotes, owns, because you don't really own anything. I've talked about this before, but it's true. I go to visit her, and there's a notice in the elevator reminding owners of units in the building that if they're going to replace the drapery in their windows, it has to conform with building standards, and it can't look any different than the original equipment. So it has to be the same type, style, and color as the original curtains. And I'm like, Mom, you don't own your place if you can't even change your curtains. She's self-facing, so she gets a lot of heat from the sun. And so she wanted to cut down the hot temperatures in the summer. So she went to get some tint put on her windows, and she was told, you're not allowed to do that. You can't tint your windows. What? Just recently, her gas fireplace went on the fritz. Now, she pays a maintenance fee to the strata. It's over $400 a month just for maintenance. She doesn't pay rent. She owns the place. But she has to keep paying this. Everyone that owns in the building has to pay it. Maintenance for the whole building. The gas fireplace goes out. She calls them about it, and they said, "Oh, sorry, that's your problem." So she had to call in a repairman, fix her gas fireplace, clean it up, and get it ready for winter. And it cost her $700 out of pocket. Don't even get me started with dealing with neighbors being too loud, or maybe you're getting complaints because you're too loud and having to deal with somebody on the left of you, the right of you, above you, below you. All that. It's like, oh, to me, it's so restrictive to live in an environment like that. I can't imagine having to pay for the privilege. You know, I want to be able to do, if I want to wake up at 3 in the morning and turn my stereo on and crank the music, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to live in a place I can't do that. Yes, respect of your neighbor, sure, but that's why I wouldn't put myself in that situation, because I don't want to have to worry about people next door to me or underneath me or above me, you see? But all the things that I do to my van and people do to their vans, we're lucky. It's that true ownership feeling. It's a lot the same if you own a house, a standalone single-family dwelling. You can't even put up a fence unless it follows all the codes that the city is enforcing on you. It can only be a certain height, and in many cases it can only be made out of certain materials and can only be a certain color. Friend of mine has a property, and he bought a house in a pretty dense neighborhood, and he wanted to build a workshop in the back, like a garage, just not for vehicles, more of a place where he does a lot of welding, woodwork. He even makes his own rifle barrels, and he makes bullets. Like, he's got his own shop for everything, basically. So he went to build this in the back, and it took him about 1.5 years of politics dealing with the city to get all the required permits, and he had inspectors come 3 times, and he had to keep changing his plans. They kept telling him what he can and can't do with his property, and he wanted to put a wood stove in there too. Amazingly, he got that approved. Took a while, but he's actually getting a wood stove in a major suburb of Vancouver. So it's not technically the city of Vancouver, but still, it's one of the suburb cities. I couldn't believe that he got that. So high fives to him. That's props. Most people these days wouldn't even try to put a wood stove in. And that's one of the things I like about the van life, is I can cut holes and put a wood stove in. I don't need anyone's permission. But long story short, he sat down, had a beer with me, and he's just shaking his head from all the stress. He was so overwhelmed. The amount of bureaucracy involved in doing something as simple as building a shed in your backyard. Your backyard. And he went down to the, at one point he went down to City Hall, and he was trying to get all the permits and getting everything in order to do this. And they use Google Maps to zoom in on his property to tell him where he can and can't put the shed, and how big it can be and how high it can be and all this stuff, right? And then they said, "Sir, you can't have a trailer that long parked on your property." Google Maps is sometimes like 6 months old, right? So he bought the property. The previous owner owned a fifth wheel. It wasn't there anymore, but it showed up on their Google Maps, and so they're giving him shit for having a trailer that's over 24 feet long on his private property, which is a no-no according to the city bylaws. So we had to argue with them to say, that's not my trailer, it's not there anymore, that map is out of date, you know. So they actually sent someone down to make sure he didn't have a trailer there. His driveway is massive. It's long enough all the way down the side of the house to the backyard. He could park 3 fifth wheels there. But even though it's his property, he's not allowed to park a fifth wheel there if it's over 24 feet. He ended up buying a trailer too, and it's right at the 24-foot limit. But it's just unbelievable. And it's like, Mike, why are you arguing with the city about the previous owner's trailer? I would be arguing with them over the bylaw in the first place and say, what do you mean I can't have that trailer? Screw you. I just bought this land. My driveway's, 100 feet long. I want to put a fifth wheel there. That should be nobody's business but yours. But I digress. He chose to deal with this when he decided to buy property in the city. And he knows that there's a lot less you can do with your property than there is that you can do with your property. And it's out of control. For example, in a lot of major cities across North America, including here in Vancouver, if it snows, you're supposed to get up before 10 a.m. and shovel the sidewalk in front of your house, and if you don't, you can get fined, even though the sidewalk is city property. Actually, quite often, the last 3 or 4 meters of your front lawn are city property. And that's the case in his neighborhood, actually, where almost half the front lawn is on city property. And if you want to have a yard sale or have your kids set up a lemonade stand on that section of your lawn, the city comes around, and this happens. This is always in the news. The city comes around and tickets people for using public property for yard sales or for lemonade stands, you name it. Never mind the fact you need a business license for a lemonade stand. But what is with that hypocrisy from the city governments? Okay, you can't use their land for your yard sale, but if it snows, you have to shovel it for them. Really? Anyways, I'm just glad we don't have to deal with any of that stuff. I don't need to mow a lawn. I don't have to shovel anything. I can paint my house whatever color I want, inside and out. I can cut up the cabinets, put a wood stove in, put new lighting in, put security camera system in, rearrange everything. I don't need a landlord's permission. I don't need the city's permission. I don't need the strata's permission. And that's all there is to it. It's called freedom. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. And that's why I say if somebody just handed me the keys to a free house and said, Justin, you don't need to live in your van anymore, I would say, thanks, take the keys. I would go on Craigslist and I would list the house for rent. And I'd stay in my van. Keep on rocking in the free world, everyone.
Keep on